Good afternoon to the NISAC family, to the county officials that have joined us here today for a special NISAC briefing on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and an update on HEAP. This is a update for county leaders, and I mean that respectively of all of you, each and individually, each of you as a leader in your respective department, whether you're a county executive, board chair, County Department of Social Services Commissioner, County Administrator, you're all leaders in your field. I'm Stephen Aquario, the Director of the New York Association of Counties. A quick run of show here today. Hopefully we'll get through this in 1 hour. We have an opening remarks from our President, Phil Church, followed by a NISAC update, which I'll provide. We'll then go to the National Association of Counties for a federal update from the county's perspective in Washington, D.C. We have the governor's office as well, who will provide a state update as of October 29th, 2025, followed by a county update from the Departments of Social Services, Kyra Pospisil and Paul Brady from the New York Public Welfare Association will give us an update from the local commissioner's perspective. And I will record that part of this webinar, and then we'll close the recording and then get into a discussion amongst the counties themselves without a recording, so that we could talk freely amongst ourselves about some initiatives which are working, some things that may not be working locally, some things that are on our mind, and then we'll wrap it up from there. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to the Oswego County Administrator and the NISAC President, Phil Church. Phil.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. I know you're probably, like me, fielding a lot of constituent calls and working with your departments of social services and trying to get answers about what's happening with SNAP and HEAP. New York's counties are on the front lines of this, and that's because New York is one of only 10 states in which counties perform the SNAP function. So residents are calling us, and our caseworkers are trying to provide answers that they don't have. And we've been asked to solve a problem that we simply don't have the resources or legal authority to take care of. This is the first time a federal administration has directed states not to issue SNAP benefits during a government shutdown. 3 million New Yorkers may not receive food assistance after November 1. Additionally, Home Energy Assistance Program, which helps over 1.5 million people in New York, that's been delayed, and the funding levels aren't known. Counties will not be able to backfill this federal program, either of these federal programs. We don't have the fiscal capacity, and we don't have a legal mechanism to do so. These are federal responsibilities and must be met at the federal level. So today's briefing really has 4 goals: to provide you with the most current information from the federal, state, and national partners, to clarify what counties can and cannot do in this situation, to discuss how we can support our residents through emergency networks and other resources, and to coordinate our advocacy efforts with congressional and federal agencies. We have an excellent lineup of speakers today who will walk us through where things stand and what we might expect in the coming days and weeks. I do want to thank Steve Aquario, our Executive Director, and NISAC staff for their tireless efforts in working with the Governor's Office, NACO, and our congressional delegation. I also want to thank our partners from NACO for joining us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Steve Aquario, our Executive Director, to moderate the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, President Church, and thank you all for joining us here again today. Let me start by laying out a quick timeline. I know that all of you are being questioned locally by the public, by perhaps departments, legislators, constituents, but most importantly, those in need of public assistance. So let me start by, before I do that, as we go through this and into discussion, I'll be taking questions through the chat mechanism. So if you want to use the chat at any point in time, either now or at when we close the recording, we can take questions through the chat. But let's look at a timeline of events. October 1st, the federal government shutdown began when the Congress failed to pass a continuing resolution to fund government operations for fiscal year 2026. On October 10th, 9 days later, the United States Department of the Agriculture directs states to not issue federally funded SNAP benefits for November. On October 23rd, NYSAC issued an urgent call to all county leaders urging advocacy, and many of you have weighed in that respect. On October 24th, our governor, Kathy Hochul, formally called on the United States Department of the Agriculture to use emergency contingency funds. There's $6 billion in emergency contingency funds to ensure that SNAP benefits are not disrupted and remain issued. The governor on October 24th, last Friday, asserting that the state cannot backfill this program. Also on October 24th, the State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance issued guidance to all social services districts confirming that payment files for November 1st, SNAP benefits have been paused pursuant to the United States Department of Agriculture. Social service districts must continue processing applications and recertifications. That no action is required further at the local level, that any further pause in working with electronic benefit transfer or EBT debit cards is being handled by the state at the state level with state vendors, and that households will be notified by Saturday, November 1st, about the status of their benefits by the state of New York. Also, on October 24th, the United States Department of the Agriculture released a memo defending its position. The memo stated that contingency funds are not legally available to cover regular monthly benefits, and that transferring funds from other sources would jeopardize other school meals, WIC and WIC programs. On the 27th of October, the governor announced $30 million in emergency state funds to support over 16 million meals through food banks and other emergency food providers. This on top of an earlier announced $11 million announced the previous week. For your information and for you to distribute locally, the governor also launched a new website, ny.gov/federal cuts, where New Yorkers can share their stories and access resources. The state agency has also published a web page to maintain current information on the status of the ongoing SNAP benefit disruption. That email is otda.ny.gov/shutdown. Lastly, on October 28th, Attorney General Letitia James, along with 24 other state attorneys general, filed a lawsuit against the United States Department of the Agriculture for allegedly unlawful suspension of SNAP benefits during this shutdown. The multi-state coalition argues that the United States is violating federal law by refusing to issue November SNAP payments to more than 40 million Americans, including 3 million New Yorkers. As of today, October 29th, here's where we stand. Nearly 3 million New Yorkers are enrolled in SNAP. You all have the numbers within your county. November benefits are scheduled to be issued on November 1st. However, as of October 29th, the United States Department of Agriculture has not authorized the states to release those benefits. So if nothing changes As you know, millions of New Yorkers will not receive their food assistance starting this Saturday. With respect to HEAP, a home energy assistance program, opens, as you know, in early November, coming up this weekend into next week, into the 15th of November. That covers 1.5 million New Yorkers to help with heating assistance. Federal funding for HEAP is currently frozen due to the shutdown. The program opening has been delayed indefinitely, especially important as temperatures are dropping and the heating season has already begun. On top of all this, the new federal regulations for able-bodied adults, these new work requirements, and we'll hear from Kyra and from Paul Brady in a few minutes. The new work requirements will start on November 1st as well. This is the new federal law. So the last thing I want to say in this regard is New York has stepped up with $41 million. Other states are stepping up as well. California announcing the state will make an $80 million available to food banks, mobilizing the state's National Guard to assist with food bank operations. Rhode Island announcing $6 million in TANA funds to provide for emergency payments to EBT cards. New Mexico announcing a package of $16 million. Minnesota announcing a contingency fund of $4 million. Louisiana working on a resolution to allocate up to $150 million a month from the state's health department budget to cover these food assistance in Louisiana. So too in Virginia, using budget surplus to cover $150 million per month in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I know that you're speaking with the public. Here's what we've collectively been doing, the counties and NYSAC on your behalf. Number one, we're directly engaged with our state's congressional delegation and regular contact with the state's delegation, communicating with Senator Schumer, Leader Jeffries, members of the congressional delegation directly. Senator Schumer had a press conference earlier today asking the United States to release the contingency funds. Number two, coordinating with our governor's office every day, daily communications with the governor's office, as well as state agencies. The state has made it perfectly clear that the state cannot backfill these federal programs. I'm reporting to the state and to the public that the counties cannot own the responsibility of these programs in any way whatsoever. We are partnering with our National Association of Counties, working with NACO, as 42 million Americans are at risk of losing SNAP benefits. We've prepared a letter template for counties that many of you have sent to your congressional delegation. We've been providing frequently asked questions and providing updates as they become available. And we've been performing public advocacy through the media, getting the message out. What can counties do as we go forward? Number one, continue normal operations. The state has given guidance to us. Social services districts should continue to process SNAP applications, HEAP applications, recertifications, and case changes as directed by state guidance. When the federal funding is restored, it will be important to be ready immediately to issue the benefits that may be eligible to individuals and households. Number two, support emergency food networks. I know that you're doing this. I know in Albany County, watching the county executive recently do a hotline directing individuals in Albany County where they can get resources. Albany County Executive Dan McCoy doing that. Many of you have relationships with your food banks, your food pantries, and emergency food shelters. Now's the time to strengthen those connections to ensure that residents have access to these resources. And again, the governor hopefully will further elaborate on the use of the $41 million that she has allocated to flow through Feeding New York and other regional food banks. Number three, communicate clearly with your residents. Use the state's OTDA website as the primary source of information. OTDA is providing and maintaining current updates and frequently asked questions. Let's use the state's website as the central source of information. Be open with constituents. This is a federal crisis that counties cannot solve, but that you're doing everything possible to connect them with available resources. amplify your advocacy efforts, and support your staff. Your social services employees are on the front line, fielding angry and, more importantly, scared calls from people who may not know how to feed their families. So looking ahead, the next 72 hours are critical. November 1st is Saturday. Either the Congress will act, the United States will reverse its position, or millions of New Yorkers will wake up without food assistance. Look, folks, we're in uncharted territory. There's no playbook for this. But what I know is that New York counties have always risen to meet the challenges. We did it during COVID. We'll get through this working together. In the next part of our briefing, we'll now hear from our federal partner at NACO, from Julia Cortina, about what NACO is hearing, and I'll turn it over to Julia Cortina, NACO's Associate Legislative Director for Human Services, for a federal update. Julia, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you all. Great to see the New York folks. So I'm just going to add a little bit of extra detail around some of what Stephen said around SNAP, and then I'm just going to touch on WIC as well. So with SNAP, as we walked through that timeline of what's going on, and you guys have been, very familiar with, on the SNAP contingency fund. So just a little bit of extra information on that. The SNAP contingency fund has what we believe to be around $6 billion in it. It might be a little bit less. SNAP benefits right now are going at around $8 to $9 billion a month. So if those contingency funds were to be fully spent today, they would not cover a full month of November benefits. This means that if those contingency funds were to be released, it'd be really critical for FNS to release clear written instructions and guidance to EBT vendors on how to distribute partial benefits to recipients. As Stephen noted, last week, FNS issued a memo saying that they would not be using the contingency funds. There are a lot of questions right now whether or not they can't use them or whether they're required to use them. In the memo, they said that legally they can't use these contingency funds. I haven't seen, much really backing that. Then there's also the lawsuit saying that these contingency funds are legally required to be used. So we're going to see how that case plays out. The other thing I want to flag that at this point, the process of how SNAP gets distributed to participants, states and counties and county administered states determine eligibility and benefit levels with recipients. Then those get sent over as issuance files to EBT vendors. Those EBT vendors are the ones that receive money from the Treasury Department and put the money on the EBT cards that participants use. As we know, those issuance files have been paused, so they haven't been sent to the vendors right now. If SNAP were to be fully funded today, the government was to reopen today, the time it takes for vendors to get those issuance files and sort everything out takes a little bit of time. In California, for example, it's important for vendors to have those issuance files by October 23rd. All of this to say that if the government were to be, fully reopened right now and SNAP benefits were to be fully funded, we would still see a delay in November benefits being issued at this point. So, we're kind of past the point of November benefits not being delayed. When it comes to the shutdown, we're really not seeing any signs of any resolution of the shutdown ending. I really wish I had better news on that, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're at this time just not seeing that. NACO did issue a statement calling for the end to the shutdown and for Congress to come together and find a bipartisan solution on this. As many of you know, there's two competing continuing resolutions, which are temporary stopgaps to fund the government. Republicans would like for a clean continuing resolution to be passed, while Democrats would like a continuing resolution that includes the extension of the ACA subsidies. Both sides have kind of dug in their heels on it. We have seen a bill introduced, two bills actually, one by Senator Josh Hawley, a Republican from Missouri, that would fund SNAP until the government reopens. That bill has had a growing list of co-sponsors, as well as a Democratic co-sponsor that Democratic sponsor that joined yesterday, Senator Peter Welch of Vermont, making it a bipartisan bill. There's also been a bill introduced by Senator Lujan from New Mexico that would fund SNAP and WIC. Right now, Republican leadership has said that they do not have an interest right now in kind of these one-off bills. There's been bills floated to fund just the military, air traffic controllers, and so forth. And right now, it really, we're in kind of a wait and see period on what Congress does, but it doesn't look like either of those bills really have much of a chance right now. But of course, things are changing by literally the minute. So we'll see. I will just flag too today. I saw this in the news in between calls, so I haven't read into it too much, but there was a statement that came out from President Trump saying that they are going to figure out November SNAP benefits. We have no details right now into what that exactly means, what he means by that. But again, FNS last week said that they do not plan to use the existing SNAP contingency fund for November benefits. On WIC right now, WIC is in, I would say, a little bit of a better position than SNAP. WIC has a $150 million contingency fund, and WIC is the Special Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program for women, infants, and children, just in case you're not familiar with it. But they had a $150 million contingency fund that was exhausted in the beginning of October. They then received an additional $300 million from a child nutrition account under USDA to keep the program funded until the end of October and in some states early November. And it looks like right now that we've seen some indications from the White House that they plan to transfer additional money over WIC to keep that program funded. I will just drop in the chat. We signed on to a letter with 43 other organizations urging for those additional emergency funds for WIC. With that, I'm happy to take any questions. Steve, I think you pretty much covered it all on the low-income home and energy assistance program. I really haven't heard anything additional besides what you mentioned earlier.
Okay, Julia, thank you very much. And thank you for your NACO advocacy in Washington, D.C. Let's hear from the local departments of social services very close to this issue. Paul Brady and Kyra Pospesel is here with us. Paul, we'll go to you, and then Kyra. Let's hear an update from both of you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Paul Brady. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Public Welfare Association. We represent the social service districts throughout the state of New York. Obviously, we're paying very close attention to what's occurring in Washington right now. And a lot of the questions that we're fielding, or at least I'm fielding, our office is fielding from the local districts, has to do with communication and information that's going out into your communities. And I know that, I've been asked to provide some information relative to what can be said, what can't be said. And I think Steve had mentioned this early on. OTDA has indicated that they are going to be text messaging the SNAP recipients to let them know about the status of their SNAP benefit and the issues that they'll run into after November 1st. We do know this has been mentioned to us by OTDA that people who have benefits that were authorized prior to November 1st, they will carry over. They will have the ability to be able to access them. But as has been mentioned, any new authorization has not been transmitted. So there's also the ability for OTDA to be able to communicate with the EBT vendor and the EBT Edge website, which is what their recipients use, will also carry a message about that. And as Steve had mentioned, there is the website that the state has relative to the shutdown. And I've encouraged districts to actually put this up. Because if a member from a recipient from your community has some questions about what's happening as far as the shutdown is concerned, they can click on that link. It will immediately take them to the OTDA page. I've looked at various counties' websites at this point because a couple of people have asked me to sort of screen them for them. And getting information out not only about the shutdown, but also about community resources that exist, about the food banks, the pantries, free meals that may be potentially available in your community. I think all of that information is relevant to be able to get out there just as quickly as possible. And Kyra, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add to that.
Sure. Actually, can you hear me? Oh, don't tell me you can't hear me. You can't hear me. Great. Okay.
Yes, it
Thank
can.
you.
Yeah, we can.
Oh, you can.
We can hear you.
Oh, great. Great. Okay. So I would add that starting Monday morning, all your DSSs are going to be running exclusively, almost like an emergency room. You need to pull every social welfare examiner you have, make sure they can do emergencies, because you're going to be doing emergencies on the HEAP side of the house and potentially on the SNAP side of the house, because Monday's going to be 11/3. Cold weather period in upstate New York basically starts on 11/1. And most of us have been in and out of code blue already for a couple of nights here. I say that because we have never seen basically emergency food benefits. When we've had emergencies in New York State, the DSS have run the disaster recovery centers. And that was because when we didn't have power and electricity, we had food spoilage. So we would be able to actually refund the entire benefit. There is a GIST message that was sent as an attachment to the message that we got the other day. So the one that was marked on October 24th that Steve was talking about, there was an old GIST message that was dated February 11th, 2019. It was the heading was partial federal government shutdown. In that, it tells LDSSs what they can do. Here's the big issue. If you have a current client who's on TA and they need to have emergency food assistance and there's no other resources, that means your team needs to check with every resource. And here I just found out this morning, our local community action is going to be down to 50% because they're running out of funding. And that's our largest food pantry that we have. They're going to have to sign, the clients are going to have to sign a recoupment. So in the following month, after we give them emergency food money, we're going to be recouping that from their benefit. The people in the most need are going to be kicked again. It's really very, very sad. On the other end of the spectrum, your SSI clients, where you're the rep payee, those are the EAA clients. They are not eligible. Clearly in this GIST message, they cannot authorize the benefit. So it's people who do not have resources. They're going to come in, fill out an emergency application. Your team will have to check every resource, document that in that case file before they can document how much money they can have. And I'm looking at the most I see is $6.10 per day. A family of three, it's less than that. Family of three, it looks like it's $12.96. And that's only for the remainder of the days in the month. So that's something new. None of us has ever seen. So you're going to be running those two emergencies, your ABODs that you have currently, and then of course your new ABODs. So DSS, it's kind of wild to walk into the lobbies right now and all the things that are going on. So any help any county department wants to jump in and do, we'll certainly accept it.
To the governor's office, working day in, day out with the National Governors Association on this issue, along with the USDA. We're joined by two of the individuals leading New York's advocacy in Washington during the shutdown. Also, the teams of the regional representatives of the governor are also on this call. So your regional representatives are on this call. If you have localized issues that you're dealing with, which you would like the state to know about, in addition to your OTA contacts, you could also, of course, contact the governor's regional representative. They're on this call, and you could also feel free to use them as your conduit to the governor's office. With us here today is Kyla Hines. I'll go to Kyla, and Amy Sapkowski, also with the governor's DC office. Kyla, we'll go to you.
Thanks so much. Thank you guys for having me here. My name is Kyla Hines. I'm the Governor's Director of Federal Affairs here in Washington, D.C. I want to augment a little bit about what Jill has already shared on what's happening with the shutdown and Congress. Yesterday, the Senate held its 13th vote to pass the House's temporary funding bill that would fund the federal government through November 21st. Speaker Johnson has stated he will not recall Republican members who are in their home districts. Leader Jeffries has directed Democratic members to stay in Washington, D.C. during the week, should there be an opportunity to take up a vote. What this means in a practical sense is there's really very little hope for any legislative off-ramp. Jill shared that there are a handful of SNAP funding bills that are out there. There's a lot of, we're hearing from others saying just pass the House passed bill, but with a limited funding stream until 11/21, it's getting closer and closer to being an ineffective CR. Really, we don't see much changing on that front unless Speaker Johnson makes the choice to bring back his members. These Senate options are not looking viable. For your guys' awareness, we in the governor's office are in regular communication with our bipartisan delegation, sharing at a congressional level what are the impacts on SNAP, on HEAP, on healthcare, et cetera, with another one planned for later this week so that our congressional members understand what things are going to look like in their districts starting on Saturday. With respect to SNAP, so in addition to the information both Steve and Jill have already shared on what's happening with USDA and the frozen process and the significant delay in getting those EBT dollars out there, I want to provide you some additional context as well. One, USDA has issued in its guidance a notice that they will not reimburse states or localities, anybody trying to fund SNAP benefits or other SNAP-like benefits in this emergency period, which is very unusual. New York receives approximately $650 to $680 million in federal dollars a month to issue those EBT benefits to the 3 million New Yorkers Steve talked about earlier. We in the governor's office are actively working on contingency planning. We know that November benefits are guaranteed to be delayed and at best to be issued mid to late November if something changes either over the weekend or early next week. The USDA, we've talked directly with appropriators. Amy on my team is on regular calls with appropriators, both majority and minority appropriators, trying to think creatively about how we can urge and call usage for the $5 to $6 billion in the contingency funds. But USDA has been very clear. They are not going to use those funds for the purposes of a shutdown. SNAP is a federally funded program. Historically, it's always been federally funded, and no state, no county can absorb the kind of costs that we're talking about, the full costs, right, of these programs. That said, Steve already went over, we've got $41 million in existing funding that the governor is fast tracking and front loading those already appropriated dollars to try and fill this gap. At the same time, while we're taking this proactive approach, we are monitoring and working in real time with OTDA to develop additional strategies for this very fast and evolving situation. From my seat here in DC, it's wild. We are things change by the minute, and at the same time, everything that is changing is not having a dramatic impact on the actual constituents who are being harmed by what's happening right now. So bear with us as we are trying to work with those congressionals and the agency leadership to address this crisis with the SNAP funding. I think Steve and Jill have also echoed what we saw during COVID, right? In COVID, you had everybody sort of linking arms and trying to work together here. right now we are not able to really break through and find a collective path forward on this program. But anything that you all can do within your counties to also urge action it can only help. Secondly, on HEAP, OTDA announced last week that HEAP is delayed by weeks because of the shutdown. Historically, New York would receive between $250, $280 million in federal assistance, in federal heating assistance. Because the way that program runs, we cannot open the portal for those automatic issuances and payments until the federal dollars land in our state. Again, that's another situation where the governor's office is working hand in glove to come up with creative solutions. I think, the weather is always somewhat unpredictable. We are having a somewhat warmer October, and hopefully early November. And our hope is that we will be successful in getting the federal government to reopen shortly. I don't want to go over too many other points that Steve, you and Jill have already gone over, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end.
At everyone's time, I know each and every one of you, in your own way, want to try to solve this crisis. I know each and every one of you in your own way want to address this locally. And I guess to re-stress what our speakers have informed us here today, the centralization and the distribution of communication coming from the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance, OTDA, as the central hub of that information, real-time information, frequently asked questions being posted on their website. And again, households will receive direct communication from the state agency as to the status of their November benefits.